Alright, we got a Honda Pilot here with a flashing check engine light. See if we can get this thing fixed. Alright, first thing we'll do, we'll go into our scan tool. We're going to read the codes. Now usually a flashing check engine light is going to be a misfire. And I could feel a little fish bite misfire when I pulled it in. So I'm pretty sure that's what we're going to find. And yes, we do have a misfire. We got it on cylinder 3, P0303 misfire. So we will go back and, oops, went back one too many. We're going to go into our live data. We're going to look at our misfires, see how many we're getting. A lot of data here. Okay, there's our misfires. Alright, we already got some right there on cylinder 3 counting up. You can see we're already at 9. And I can definitely feel it. Every time it misfires, I can feel just a little bit of a fish bite on the steering wheel. It's counting up pretty decent, so we have a pretty steady misfire. Not every revolution of the engine, but it's definitely there quite a bit. And while I'm thinking of it, Honda has two thresholds for misfires. One is basically if it's going to damage the catalytic converter, so that would be considered a severe misfire. So basically if it's misfiring every time the engine goes around. And then they have a less severe misfire, and it will just set the check engine light, but it won't turn it on. So basically for every 200 revolutions, the thresholds, I would have to look up the numbers, but it's usually anywhere from 30 to 90 misfires on a cylinder. In 200 revolutions, it will set the flashing check engine light. And then if it's every 1,000 revolutions, if it hits around 35 or 40 misfires, then it'll just set the check engine light, but it won't flash. And so right here, this cylinder misfire right here, this would be what the computer looks at for a flashing check engine light. And if we can find cylinder B right here, this B, this would be for the less severe misfires. And so that's what this counter is. So basically if we want real-time misfires, we're going to look up here at this one. But when you look at a scan tool, if you see them both, that's why there's a B and just a regular. That's what the engine computer is looking for to determine whether it wants to just set a check engine light or if it wants to flash it. And you can see that it will reset. But you can see our misfires are definitely counting up pretty good. So let's go under the hood and take a look. Alright, as you can see with the hood popped open, this is a 3.5 liter V6. You can see it has the IV Tech with VCM or variable cylinder management. I'm just going to pop this cover off. And I'm just going to twist that one and this one right here, and we can lift this thing off. All we got to do is turn it like that. And we should be able to just pop it right off now. Just a couple of little rubber type clips in there and we can take it right off. Alright, that's what it looks like with the cover off. Pretty standard Honda J Series V6. This is a 3.5 liter. There's our belts over here, so that means this is the front of the engine. We got cylinders 1, 2, and 3 in the back. We got cylinders 4, 5, and 6 in the front here. So that's going to be bank 1 is back there. This is bank 2. Just so you can kind of get the orientation. A firing order on these, it's going to be 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, and 6. And that's pretty much standard on all the J series. That's going to be the firing order. These particular ones and most of the newer ones are going to have VCM, or variable cylinder management. That basically means it's going to deactivate the cylinders at certain times, or certain cylinders at certain times. So it can run in 3-cylinder mode, and when it does that, it's going to deactivate 1, 2, and 3 back there, and it's just going to run on 4 through 6 up here. Or it can run on 4-cylinder mode, which means it's going to deactivate cylinder 3 and cylinder 4, and then it's just going to run on 1, 2, and then 5 and 6. Or it can run obviously in 6-cylinder mode. At idle and acceleration, it's going to run in 6 cylinders. Lower cruise and more steady speeds, at the lower end, it's going to run in 3-cylinder mode. Higher cruising and steady speeds, it's going to run in the 4-cylinder mode. And when it does activate the VCM, you'll see the little echo light up on the dash. So basically, these engines can run as a 3, a 4, or a 6-cylinder. It's doing this by deactivating the fuel injectors at those certain cylinders, and it locks up the cams so that the valves stay closed, so the valves do not open and close when they're deactivated. And unfortunately, VCM can cause issues. It can cause excessive oil consumption, and obviously if the oil gets too low, it can do some damage to the engine, especially the cylinder walls. The pistons can kind of vibrate and realign the rings, and obviously that's not good. That's going to allow your compression to fail, and more oil is going to get up into the spark plugs. And fouled spark plugs is a big issue on these. So those are the things you got to kind of think about when you're working on these V6s. Now, Honda did update the software to kind of combat the issue, but these problems still remain, even with software updates, which kind of limits how often these cylinders switch on and off. Because some people would kind of just very, lightly go a little bit on the gas and off, and it would cause the VCM to activate and deactivate, activate, deactivate, and that really caused excessive oil consumption. So they kind of fixed that issue, but the oil consumption and the plug fouling still remain. So as you can tell, I'm not a real huge fan of the variable cylinder management on these things. Anyway, let's see if we can get this thing fixed. Okay, so where do we start then? Now, thinking logically, Hondas historically have not had fuel delivery issues. Now, I know the newer 1.5 liter turbos with direct injection, if I could say it right, they have fuel dilution issues, but as a general rule, Hondas don't have fuel delivery problems. They're pretty reliable, so I'm not going to start there. I know other manufacturers do, and if this wasn't a Honda, maybe we would have to start there, but it's a Honda, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. I think we'll keep it simple, and we'll go for the ignition coils first. And instead of breaking out the fancy schmancy equipment, we're just going to swap coils. We'll make it easy, something you guys could do at home. We're just going to swap the coils. I know I used my expensive scan tool to look at the misfire data, but the cheaper code readers don't show that, or they typically don't show that data. So that's why I had to break out the big scan tool. So we're going to take the number 3 over there, that coil, we're going to swap it with the number 4. Now, as I showed with the firing order, they're not right next to each other in the firing order, so that's a good swap. And then, so what we want to do is we want to look at the scan data, and then we'll see, did our misfire stay on number 3, or did it move over to number 4? And the way that ECM, or the way the engine computer determines misfires, is the engine computer is looking at the crankshaft position sensor. And basically on each firing event, it wants to see that crankshaft sensor move and send a signal back at a certain speed and a certain time frame. When it takes too long, it's going to interpret that as a misfire. It's not an exact science, so we need to take it with a grain of salt. And what we don't want to do is swap the coil with a cylinder that's right next to it in the engine or in the firing order. So that's why we're going to swap it with the number 4, because it's I can't say it. It's not right next to each other in the firing order, so it's a much more valid test. Now, even though one of the symptoms from variable cylinder management is it could damage the pistons, we know that, and cause the rings to get screwed up, but it can also cause excessive oil consumption. And so the first thing we want to do, let's make sure this thing is full of oil. We don't want to make sure, or we want to make sure this thing is not low, and that's contributing to our issue. Now this thing is full all the way up to the top of the grids there. So low oil is not a problem, and the oil looks clean. So this thing had the oil changed not too long ago for sure. And you got to kind of feel for it back here. But the coil, like I said, is way back here. I can't even see it. I'll just loosen up the nut. Try to take it off without dropping it. And then we'll get the coil out. Alright, there's one coil. It looks used, but I don't see any issues. Now we'll pop the number 4 out. Do the same thing. Loosen up the nut and take it out. And it's easier to pull the coil out just a little bit and then unplug it. There's our number 4. Actually looks in a little better shape than our number 3, but pretty similar. So we'll just swap them. I'm not even going to bother putting the nut back on. We'll just swap it, fire it up, and see if our misfire moved. And I know it's kind of hard to see. I can't get very good camera angles, but you can see, you know, if you're pulling these coils out, you just pop the nut off just like that, and you can pop the coil out, pinch the tab, and take it off. Pretty easy. And you can see there's number 4, 5, and 6 coil right here. On the back side of the engine, they're back in there. I don't know if I can feel them. There's number 1 right there, number 2, and then number 3 is way over here under all this stuff. Definitely hard to get to, and you just kind of got to do it by feel. Alright, we're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to go into live data, fire up the vehicle, and then we'll look and see if our misfire moved. I anticipate that it's not going to move, because like I said, coils, usually this vehicle has 90,000 miles. Usually Honda coils don't fail at 90,000 miles, although it's not unheard of completely. But I suspect we're dealing with a problem with the variable cylinder management and plug fouling, issues like that from the excessive oil consumption due to that. So there's our misfires. We'll fire this thing up and look and see if it moves to either 3 or 4. No misfires. Maybe we fixed it. No, probably not. You can see we're counting up already on number 3. So no, our problem did not move. You can see right there. We're counting up pretty steady. So it's definitely not a coil problem. So let's see, what do we do next? Alright, in order to keep things simpler, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the number 3 spark plug and we're going to take a look at it. I suspect it's fouled up. That's a common issue on these, and if we think about it, when it's running in 3-cylinder mode, it deactivates 1, 2, and 3. When it's running in 4-cylinder mode, it's deactivating 3 and 4. So what's the common denominator? That's right, number 3. So that's on these with the variable cylinder management that can go both, 3 and 4 cylinders. that is our problem child all the time, is right there, number 3. So I suspect we're going to find it all filed up, and then we want to compare it maybe to number 4 and maybe number 5 over here and see what the difference is. So we'll just reach back over here, get our plug on our coil out of the way. Alright, using safety glasses, I'm going to blow out the cylinder before I pull the spark plug, just in case there's any garbage in there. I don't want to drop it down into the cylinder. Alright, here's the setup I'm going to use to get the spark plug out. It's just a standard 5/8 inch socket for spark plugs. It's got a magnet at the end there. It's got a little swivel. This one has a short extension, and then I'm using a long extension that locks in so I won't pull it off. Here's another one from Gear Wrench. You can see this one's longer, but it's a little too long. You can see trying to get back there, there's some pipes and stuff. This will definitely not fit and get you trapped in there, so I'm going to go with this. And we'll just slide it back into place. Lock it in, use my 3/8 inch ratchet to break it loose. It's definitely a little tight back here. You can see I'm using a flex head because there's not a lot of room in here. Well, there she is. Can you see it? You can see it's pretty oil fouled. It's hard to tell, but it looks like the gap has opened up a little too much. I suspect these are the original plugs. But yeah, it definitely, just at first glance, it's definitely oil soaked. And yeah, I know it's a little weird. The VCM can cause it to use excessive oil, but yet it can starve the rings and cause problems and score the inside of the cylinder wall. So if I mentioned it or if I didn't mention it, I'm not a fan of the VCM. We'll just mark this one, number 3, and we'll pull the 4 out, see what it looks like also. Alright, now for the number 4, this is the setup I'm going to use. So I'm going to use the gear wrench with a little bit longer built-in extension, and then I got to use the little 1.5 extension just to get it a little bit longer, but the other one is too long. So this is a setup for everything up here. So yeah, we'll just take our spark plug with extensions, just set it down into place like that, and you can see it sticks it out in a good spot for us to get a ratchet in. And we'll pop the ratchet on. Come on. You can do it. There we go. Now, if I didn't mention it, I don't advise taking these off when the cylinder head is hot. So if the engine's hot, wait. Good rule of thumb is when the cylinder head temperature is at least 100 or below. If it's above 100, I wouldn't take them out till it cools down below 100. Let's see if I can... No, I'm not going to try this one-handed. I'm going to hold it with 2. So I got to set you down. And there we go. This one looks like it's in a little better shape, but it's still oil fouled just like the other one, but not as bad. Alright, I'm going to mark this one number 4, and we can compare them. We can look at the two. And you can see this is number 3, this is number 4. I'll turn them to the side so you can get a good look at them. Come on. You can see it's leaving oil on my glove, but this one looks in much better shape. That one looks pretty normal. And yeah, just judging by how they look, I'm pretty sure these are the original ones, but this one is definitely oil soaked and fouled because of that. So I believe we found our misfire right there. It's a fouled oil or fouled plug because of oil. The gaps look pretty much the same. This, I think it's just it gives an appearance because of the way it's built up that it might be you know, opened up a little bit, but I believe they're the same. Alright, now if the plug is indeed causing our issue, which I believe it is, but it's a symptom of the variable cylinder management doing what it does. But in order to fix this today, I believe it needs a new plug. But we can confirm that by just switching them. So I'm going to put the number 4 back over there, and I'm going to put the number 3 in the number 4 position, and we'll fire it up and see if our misfire moved to number 4. Alright, number 4. We'll set back into place over here. Alright, we'll take our number 3, let's see we got it marked. We'll put it in here. Alright, I marked the coil that came out of number 3. We're going to put it back in its original position. That way the only thing that will be moved is the spark plug itself. Alright, I'm not going to put the nuts back on the coils right now. We'll just fire it up and see if our misfire moved. Alright, there's our misfires. Let's fire this thing up and see if our misfire moved. If it stays on number 3, we got bigger issues. Now you can see we jumped to number 4, so our diagnosis is correct. It needs a new spark plug, at least one. In reality, it's going to get 6 spark plugs, but one will fix it right now. But there's no guarantee this issue won't come back because of the variable cylinder management. Alright, here's what's going to fix our problem today. Brand new NGK laser iridium spark plug. This is exactly what the OEM plugs are. Here you can see the part number. That's what it is for this vehicle. Of course, you always check for what vehicle you have, but that's what it looks like. And of course, so that's what it looks like brand new. So I'll put this one in, and you can see I'll just pull this one out, this bad one, and put this one in. You can see the fix, and then I'm going to replace the rest of them. Alright, there you go. That's what the brand new plug and the old one looks like. You can see how oil filled that one is and how soaked it is. The gap looks like it's a little bit wider on the old one. That's not to be, I mean, that's to be expected given the age. But but that definitely could be contributing to it. That gap opened up a little more, plus the fouling on the plugs. But I suspect 90% of the issue why it's misfiring is the fouling on the plug. So we'll put the brand new one in there and we'll make sure the misfire goes away. And whenever I do plugs, a little bit of dielectric grease right on the boot there. And if you're curious, here's the number 5. I pulled the number 5 spark plug out. I'm just going to go ahead and do them all right now. You can see the difference. That number 5 looks really good. Really good. For 90,000 miles, it looks excellent. If Honda would allow us to disable the VCM, either with the instrument cluster or the or a scan tool, these engines would be a lot better off. Number 6 spark plug right there. Looks good. And you can see there's number 2. It's not far behind number 3. This thing is getting ready to misfire also. There's the number 1 spark plug. You can see pretty close to number 2. So not as bad as number 3, but not great. You do have to use a little bit shorter setup to get to this one because the AC lines are in the way. And I know there's some controversy on the subject, but when I install the spark plugs on these Hondas, I put a little bit of anti-seize. You can see right there I have some on there. I know NGK says you don't need it, that it'll affect the torque. Honda tells you to use some and then gives you the torque spec. So I'll go with Honda. The torque spec on these is, once you crush this gasket, so you have to, on these, this model, it's about a quarter turn to crush this gasket. On others, it's different. It might be an eighth. It might go all the way around to, you know, like from noon to 7 o'clock. So just depends on the spark plug. But these, it's about a quarter turn to crush this, and then it's 16 foot-pounds. And for the most part, you can get a torque wrench on there. Mine has a flex head, and that's why I can get in there. Just a straight one, you may not be able to do it. It's tight, but it's doable. Alright, all the spark plugs are replaced. Alright, now that that's back in place, let's go see if this thing runs right. Alright, as you can see, I got the mist counters back up. Fire this thing up and see what happens. Well, right away I can feel it smoother. Obviously we don't see any misfires counting up, but I just feel in the steering wheel I can feel it's nice and smooth. I don't feel that fish bite. And you can see I moved it so we can see our misfire counter. So right now, engine's happy. And you can see our B doesn't show any misfires either. And if we go to our total cylinder misfires, you can see same thing, no misfires. So we got a confirmed fix. And there's all the spark plugs all in a row, 1 all the way through 6, and they're in line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can see 1 through 4. You can definitely see the VCM has done its damage to these. 3 is the worst, but 4 is a kind of a close second. 1 and 2 kind of suck, but these two really bad. And then 5 and 6 look pretty normal for the most part. So that's what they look like. Well, there you go. As you saw, new spark plugs fixed this thing for today. Hopefully it lives to run another day, so to speak. It's a direct result of the VCM. Variable cylinder management definitely damages the spark plugs on 1 through 4 due to fouling, and it does that naturally. But what can also happen is the piston rings can get realigned so that they're all in line with each other, and then it creates a worse problem. And if that happens, this will be back in probably 1,000 or 2,000 miles with the same issue. So hopefully that's not the problem, because if that's the problem, then the engine needs to be redone. The pistons need to be fixed, and that's a really expensive repair, and that sucks because this thing only has 90,000 miles. Honda was sued over this issue, and they settled, and as a class action lawsuit, and they extended the warranty for 8 years from the time that the vehicle was first sold. This vehicle and most other vehicles covered are now past the warranty. So like this vehicle, it would be all on the owner to fix it, and Honda is not going to fix it. And if their way of fixing it for the most part is if you bring it in, they're going to replace spark plugs 1 through 4. They won't even do all 6. They'll do 1 through 4, send you on their way. If it comes back with the same issue, then they'll have to take the engine apart and fix it. Hopefully that's not what's going to happen on this one, but only time will tell. Without specialized tools to kind of dissect the cylinder bore in there, this is the way to do it. Put new spark plugs in there and see if it comes back. These look like the original spark plugs. They don't look like somebody just put them in and then 3,000 or 4,000 miles later they fouled up. They look like they've been in there for the life of the vehicle. So hopefully this thing goes another 70 or 90,000 miles before they have to be replaced again. And if that's the case, well, then most people will be able to live with it. But it sucks if you got to pay $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to have your engine torn apart and fixed. That's no fun, which is the whole reason Honda got sued. Now, I do realize that there are things out there that can cause or can tell the VCM not to turn on. I wish I could do it with my scan tool. If I could do it with the scan tool, I would just shut it off and run it as a V6. And I think most people wouldn't mind doing that. But you can't do that, at least not with a scan tool or not on the information display. Honda doesn't let you. There are products out there that can fool the temperature. The ECT, it fools the signal going back to the engine computer and tells the computer that it's running at a little bit lower temperature than it really is. I'm not sold on those either, because then that throws off the air-fuel ratio and maybe can cause other issues. So I don't think that's a true fix either. So there's no good fix for this other than I wish Honda would have just done away with the VCM, because for the minuscule amount of fuel savings, it's not worth the engine damage that these things are causing. So in any event, hey, if you learned anything or the video helped you out, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.